Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Boston Balling. I'm your host, as always, Gabby Hurlbut, and I'm really excited to announce my special guest for this week, Carney. Conor, how are you doing today?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to have you. I was really excited that you agreed to do this with me. I think it's going to be a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so can you tell us first a little bit about your background, how you became a big sports fan, and how you got into sportscasting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a big sports fan for as long as I can remember, ever since I was a little kid, right back in the Drew Bledsoe days before Tom Brady came in and took over. And I decided just to do a podcast back in, I think it was July of 2019, so going on about a year and a half ago. And then as a stroke of luck, I ended up finding a guy who I now do a show with called DPN Commentary with the guy Ray Rout, who oddly enough is out of Toronto, Canada, who's also a Patriots fan. So we connected through that, and we've been doing it ever since.
That's so cool. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that do podcasting or that are in the sports field, their sports knowledge and sports history and interests go way back to when they were young. So
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So that's pretty cool that you've been involved with it for a while.
Yeah, for as long as I can remember. I remember when Mo Lewis hit Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady came in, which was almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So we've seen a lot.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot that I want to get to on this show, and we will touch on the Patriots a little bit later, but I want to start with the Red Sox on this episode. So the thing about the Red Sox is this has been an interesting offseason for them, right? With,
very much so, yeah.
Everything with Alex Cora and the moves that they're trying to make or saying that they're going to make. And so the first thing that I want to ask you is, how do you think that hiring Alex Cora back is going to make an impact going forward? Because I know that there's been a lot of, people that have been skeptical about it, or a lot of talk about, he wasn't out of the league long enough after everything, and they hired him back too quickly. But on the other side of things, if you take all of that out, we know that he knows how to manage. So how do you feel like that's going to impact the team this upcoming season and beyond that?
I mean, I, as a Red Sox fan, am extremely excited. Obviously, in 2018, he coached them to what was the best season in Red Sox history. I think they won 108 games, and then they just breezed through the playoffs. They breezed through the World Series. And I think he has phenomenal chemistry with a lot of the players. They seem to really like him. And it's a lot of the same guys from 2018 that are on the team now. Chris Sale is going to be coming back. JD Martinez is still around. Andrew Benintendi. I know Alexander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers were really, really close with Alex Cora.
Yeah.
So I think as far as like chemistry goes and as far as like the clubhouse goes, it's a phenomenal move for the Red Sox. I am very, very excited about it. The only downfall, and it's not even as much of a downfall for the team, it's just I know there's going to be a ton of backlash with the whole scandal and him having been suspended / fired for the last season. So there's going to be a lot of controversy surrounding that. I think, fortunately, Alex Cora is the type of guy who's extremely laid back, and he's going to be able to kind of take the bumps and bruises as it goes, because I know he's going to get a ration of, going forward, just because of his past history with the Astros.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think he came into this role knowing that that was going to be the case too.
Yep.
And if he wasn't ready to accept that, I don't think that he would have come back. And
right.
He's aware that there's going to be a lot of people that are giving him backlash and the team backlash for it, because they already have.
Yeah, exactly.
But from a managing standpoint, I think it was the best move they could have made, because we know that he knows how to work with this team, and we know that there's chemistry there, like you said, with a lot of the players. And even though they've made some moves since he's been gone, overall, it's still not that much different. I mean,
right.
They have, for the most part, the same roster that they had with that 2018 team. So I think that it's going to be a good situation for them having him back. And I think that was a step in the right direction in terms of the rebuild that they're trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like the core of the team has stayed the same. I mean, they made a few moves last season. Obviously, Mookie Betts left, unfortunately, but Alex Verdugo looks like he's going to be a stud. So outside of that, the team is very similar to the team in 2018. And fortunately, last year, I mean, obviously it was a tough situation with coronavirus, but that being just like a lost season, he didn't miss out on much.
Yeah, exactly. Because that season in general just had its own fair share of issues anyway, just from
Yeah,
the get-go because of COVID. So it
right.
really was that absent from the team. And yeah, I mean, we were worried about there being a hole there to fill with Mookie. But like you said, they have a lot of young prospects like Alex Verdugo that I think are developing. And as soon as they develop into, and have been in the league longer, I think that they could really build something strong there.
Yeah, 100%.
But of course, the concern always and still is with the pitching.
Yeah.
And there's been talks about signing Corey Kluber possibly. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that because I know that there's been mixed reactions to that. And for me personally, I feel like there's more to gain from that than not. I know that he's coming back from an injury, so it's hard to really know what he's going to bring. But in terms of cost, he won't be that expensive, and we know what he can do. So I want to hear your thoughts on how you think he could fit into the rotation, given that, Chris Sale's going to be back, Erod's going to be back. They still have Nate Eovaldi. How do you think that would make a difference to the rotation?
I think that's really the missing piece, that they're like away from being a really good team again. Obviously, last year, pitching was a huge, huge concern. Like you said, Chris Sale will be back after having Tommy John surgery. Erod will be back after last year having a ton of complications with COVID. So if they can go out and add another pitcher, especially somebody like Corey Kluber, I think that would be a great, great opportunity. And like you said, he probably won't cost all that much money because they are going to have 3 really good starters in Chris Sale, Nathan Eovaldi, and Erod. So they're really just like another guy away from having a really, really good rotation. And then from there, they just got to worry about who's going to close the games out as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's another point that I wanted to touch on. Because, I mean, a lot of people, bashed their rotation this past year, but this past year was hard to really say because they were missing some key components in the rotation. So it was a really hard year to say that that's how the pitching is going to be.
Yeah, definitely.
They're missing some key pieces there. But I agree with you. I think signing somebody like Corey Kluber would definitely be kind of the missing piece that they need to make the rotation really solid this year. But however, the bullpen, I think, still remains a problem. I think they're still missing some pieces there. The most obvious one being a real closer.
Right.
But also the bullpen in general is just, even in 2018, when they won the World Series, the bullpen was their weakest aspect then.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like there's not really a lot of reliable, even any really relief pitchers that can be reliable game to game.
Yeah, they don't really have anybody that I feel comfortable with them going to late in the game, especially the 9th inning. And I felt bad in 2019 for Alex Cora because obviously in 2018 they had Craig Kimbrell. And then when he left to go to the Cubs, they didn't replace him with anyone. They just kind of told Alex Cora to figure it out. And then he was using relievers to try and close games out because in 2019 they scored a ton of runs. Just the issue was that they could not close the door in the 9th inning. And now I know that I think they just re-signed Matt Barnes, who's always been pretty good. Darwinson Hernandez is a young kid who I think is going to be really good in the future, but they still don't have that closer like they've had when they've won the World Series in the past. Every time that they've won the World Series, they had a good closer. They had Keith Folk, Craig Kimbrell. They had Koji Uehara, who was awesome back in 2013. So that's one of the huge missing pieces is they need somebody who can protect the leads at the end of the game just as much as they need people who can pitch out of the rotation.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that with the bullpen, it's really a primarily issue with the 9th inning because the offense can only do so much. And that the offense game to game can score a lot of runs because they do still very much have a solid offense overall.
For sure.
Even though Mookie left, I think they still very much have a solid offense. And that game to game, generally, you can rely on the offense to do their thing, but only to a certain extent. You need to have there too. And you can't just go and even if you have a solid start from Eovaldi or Sale or Erod that will keep the game close and keep the run count low for the other team, you can't just have basically no bullpen or a 9th inning guy that's not really a closer trying to come out and close the game, and then they end up giving up 3 or 4 runs and losing games that way because that happened plenty of times this year. So
exactly.
I think that if they can find somebody that's an actual closer, that should be their next biggest priority. And it seems like there's not much being done from a pitching standpoint, and they're talking about certain things they want to do, but they haven't really made the necessary moves yet. And I'd like to see them, if they could do two things for me before the season starts, for me, it'd be get a real closer and hopefully sign Corey Kluber or somebody like that we know what they can do and that they can actually bring something serious to the rotation. And they have a lot of salary space now because of once they got rid of the Mookie Betts and David Price contracts.
Right.
So I think that they should utilize those mostly from a pitching standpoint. But the other thing that they did just do yesterday, literally right after we corresponded, was they signed Hunter Renfroe to that.
Yep.
And that was pretty exciting. I know I've seen mixed feelings on that too on social media.
Right.
But, to me, that seems like it's going to be a way for them to create, more versatility and diversity in the offense, because they do have a lot of left-handed hitters now. And so having him add to that, and even with the outfield in general, and obviously JBJ's status is still questionable, so we don't know what's going to happen if he would just become a fourth outfielder, which assuming JBJ stays or what. But I want to hear your thoughts on that sign and what you think of that too.
I think, unfortunately, that might be a sign that JBJ is going to end up elsewhere.
Yeah.
I actually like the signing, especially they signed him for cheap money. I think it was $3.1 million, which in the baseball world isn't a lot of money. They have a solid outfield to begin with. I know JD Martinez will probably be DH the most of the time, but he can play the outfield as well. Then you're going to have Verdugo. You're going to have Andrew Benintendi. So he would be a great fit as a fourth outfielder. And I did see on Twitter, I think it was the other day, they were showing a graph of a bunch of balls that he hit, where they would land at Fenway Park. And it looked like he would have a lot more home runs if he was playing at Fenway. So it might be the right ballpark for him as well. I think it's a great signing, especially for such short money. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he didn't have a great year hitting wise this past season, but that's you can't really gauge it off of just that.
Right.
And I mean, it's true. I feel like a lot of people are saying, and I actually agree with it, that he seems like he would be a good fit at Fenway Park based on the way that he hits and the direction that a lot of the balls go when he hits it.
Right.
And so I like the signing too. I think that it could create a lot more, diversity for them, and that could just be an extra link on the offensive side. And in terms of the defense, it seems like they are doing it with the assumption that JBJ is going to land elsewhere and that they need somebody else to move people around, and as sad as that is, I think that we kind of saw this coming, which I think that we knew that his time was going to be limited. So I think that with the way that they handled this and not having to spend a lot of money on it, I think is key. And I know people are like, well, his batting average wasn't good last year. But honestly, I mean, it was a completely different situation. He was on a different team. He was in a different situation. Like, he's working with Alex Cora now, and he's on a team that, maybe he really meshes with, and he could really be a good, fit for this offense and for this ballpark. So I think that they are making some moves, and as people are saying, Bloom moves silently, which he kind of does, because he kind of come out of nowhere, and nobody even really knew that he was even considering Renfroe.
Right. I actually like Bloom. He's very candid in a lot of his responses, which you don't see a lot these days. He's very open. So I've liked him so far. I'm very interested to see what else he does the rest of the season.
Me too. I think it's going to be really, really important. But I really don't think that they're as far off from being playoff contenders as people might think they are right now. And a lot of people are taking that off of last year. But again, with the injuries and the COVID, it's you can't really go off of last year. And again, with the young players, they're only getting better too.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of promise there, and I think they actually are closer to being contenders than people think. There's just a couple missing pieces. I think that if they can really pull those together, then I think that we might actually in the next couple of years maybe see them make a playoff run.
Yeah, and the Red Sox have historically been extremely volatile. We've seen them go from last to first quite a few times. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to see them go from last to first again.
Exactly. They've done that. They had that pattern,
they do,
2014. It's just kind of that just seems to be how they roll. And then 2018 or 2019. So that's just kind of a pattern with them that they have a really good season and then maybe they don't have a great season, or then they're really bad and then they come back and are really good again. But
Yep.
I think between the managing, the pitching moves that they're hopefully trying to make, and the signings that they've made already, I think that they're headed in the right direction. But there's obviously more that needs to be done there. And the focus going forward now before the season starts, I think needs to be on the pitching.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the offense will be just fine. It's just those missing pieces. Somebody else in the rotation, and then worry about the bullpen, really.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I'm really excited to see where they go from here. I definitely miss watching Red Sox baseball. I'm ready for it to come back, definitely. And I didn't get enough of my baseball last year, so that could be a big reason why I'm missing it so much. But I think it's really, really exciting for them, and I think that they're headed in the right direction. I think they just need to do a few more things to really
I agree completely. It's going to be an exciting season, though.
It definitely. And I mean, they're definitely still in a tough division. I mean, the Rays are still going to be really good. The Yankees are going to be the Yankees.
Yeah.
And the Blue Jays even are going to be a good team too. But I think that, they can contend with those teams if they make those moves that they're making. Because even the Yankees, we haven't really seen them do much in the offseason either. So it's not like it's really out of the realm of possibility to see the Red Sox back up with those teams and not at the bottom with the Orioles.
Yeah, I agree completely. I feel like after Christmas, we're going to see a lot more moves out of the Red Sox.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm excited to see what happens when they get some of those key starters back too.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to switch gears a little now and talk about the Patriots, because I know that you're just as big of a Patriots fan as I am. I know we corresponded on Twitter a lot about the Patriots.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things that we've taken out of this year is how frustrating it is of a season, and how, it's hard to really get excited about anything that they're doing, because they'll go and they'll disappoint the next week. So what are your thoughts when it comes to the next 3 games? Because, especially the next 2, those are going to be tough matchups for them. And it's not completely impossible for them to go to the playoffs if they win out, especially with the Dolphins losing to the Chiefs. But how likely do you think it is at this point?
At this point, I mean, I don't want to give up until they're mathematically eliminated. I've never been on board with the tanking for Trevor Lawrence or anything like that. I've wanted them.
Never on board with that either. So.
No, definitely not. Bill Belichick. I can never see Bill Belichick not wanting to win a game. And right now, I think it's 2%, 4%, whatever it is. The odds are low that they're going to make the playoffs, especially after last night. Unfortunately, the Ravens won. We were rooting for the Browns big time, but I still think they got to play to win these next 3 games. Especially, why not spoil it for the Dolphins? They spoiled it for the Patriots last season, Week 17. So just play the best that they can. Hopefully, they can beat the Dolphins, the Bills, and then the Jets, I think, are going to be playing to get their first win still in Week 17. So we'll see. All they can do is try and play their best the next 3 games. But I think kind of no matter how the cards unfold, they're not going to be able to make it this year. So they'll kind of be playing for 2021 by the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be a lot of things that need to fall into place for them to make it this year, and it's going to be tough. But I mean, the division, it seems like they always play the division tough, no matter how good or bad the other teams in the division are. I mean, even the Jets, it took a game-winning field goal to beat them last time.
Right.
They almost beat the Bills, too.
They came very close to beating the Bills. That was a tough game to watch them lose.
That was so disappointing, too, because they had it, and they hit it already in field goal range, too. So that was definitely a very disappointing game to watch towards the end. They already beat the Dolphins, but that's hard to really say because Tua wasn't starting yet.
Right, exactly.
It's very different this time around. But we know that Bill usually always prepares well for the division. So I feel like it could go really either way with these games. The likelihood of them making the playoffs are slim, but since the Dolphins did lose to the Chiefs, basically if the Dolphins keep losing games, then it could happen. But
keep hope alive, right?
Yeah.
You never want to give up hope,
especially when it comes to the Patriots, and especially when you have Bill Belichick as your coach. You can never really count him out until he's actually out.
Right, exactly. We've seen them do some miraculous things. I mean, they came back from the 28-3 deficit in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, anything can happen with the Patriots.
Yeah. I agree with that, but I think that this offseason, regardless of what happens this year, is going to be very, very important for them when it comes to a rebuild and redeveloping the team. So what are your thoughts on the quarterback situation? Because I don't really know if there's really a lot of hope for Cam to really get better at this point.
Right. I mean, at this point, we've kind of seen what he's had, and he's been, like the rest of the team, extremely inconsistent. We've seen him have some really good games, and we've seen him have some really bad games. And it's tough to decide if he's somebody who we'd want to go forward with in the future. I mean, there's not much else there as far as free agency goes. I think Dak Prescott's going to stay with Dallas. I think they'll either franchise tag him or sign him to a deal. I think that leaves like Mitch Trubisky. I think Fitzmagic's still out there. So there's not many people there, I think, what would be an upgrade from Cam Newton if they were to go to free agency. So then it kind of relies on the draft. So it's kind of up to if Bill Belichick wants to continue with a veteran like Cam Newton, or if he wants to go back and try and find somebody in the draft. And I also don't think it's out of like the realm of possibilities for him to try and grab Jimmy G still. I think he still loves Jimmy G. I don't know if that'll work. I don't know if that's even a possibility, if the 49ers will cut him, if they're willing to trade him. But I think he's somewhere, somehow on the table.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too, actually, because, there's rumors going around about Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, we worry about him a little bit because of his injury history, but he already knows the system, and we know that Belichick likes him and actually wanted to keep him and not get rid of him. Yeah. So that if they ended up with Jimmy Garoppolo, that might actually be a much more promising situation than they have with Cam. And granted, with Cam, he had to, he was joining a new system and had to learn everything in a year where he caught COVID and they couldn't practice for a while and their facilities were down. So, I mean, there were all of those factors, but at the same time, by now we see glimpses of Cam. We see him having promise, but then not the next game, and not being able to really know what to do in pressure situations a lot when you really need him to be clutch like Brady was, and he's not.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that we took for granted with Tom Brady, is there were so many moments at the end of the game where he would just come down and be Superman and win it. And we've only seen that a little bit this year with Cam, but there have been a bunch of situations at the end where they were so close to winning. And now we're realizing if one or two of those games went in the opposite direction, they're fighting for the AFC East right now still. But, they dropped the game to Buffalo. They dropped the game to the Broncos. A bunch of close games at the end where they just couldn't pull it out, where in the past they usually do.
Yeah, I think with the Patriots too, that Texans loss hurt. They should not have lost to the Texans. I think if they had won that game, this would be a very, very different conversation, even if they did lose to the Rams still, and we were sitting here right now, but they had won that game, this would be a lot different. And that loss, I think, is going to be proving to be one of the most damaging ones for them too, because that was a game that they very easily could have and should have won, and they didn't. So I think that one is going to be one of the ones that we look back on this year. If they, don't make the playoffs, which they likely won't, be like, oh, if only they had won that game, how could they be different?
Exactly. Because when I was looking at the rest of the season, that was kind of one of the games where I chalked up as a win. I'm like, oh, the Rams are going to be really tough. The Bills are going to be really tough. Houston should be relatively easy.
Exactly. Yeah, that was one of those games where you just kind of don't even think about it because you're like, oh, that should be a win. You know what I mean? And it just goes to show that the inconsistency, I think, and the defense has also been inconsistent, which has proven to be an issue because, you have the defense that shows up against the Chargers, but then you have that same defense that shows up in other games, and you're like, this isn't the Patriots defense. What's going on?
Exactly. Right. They've been extremely volatile as well. The thing I like about the defense, though, is they have a good young core of players who I think is going to carry them going forward. I mean, I like what I've seen out of, Josh Uche, Chase Winovich. Butler's been really good. Bentley's been pretty good. J.C. Jackson, obviously, is a star. We'll see what they do with him. I think he's going to have to get paid relatively soon. But then they've been kind of soft up the middle against the run. So I think they'll need to address that, hopefully, in the draft. They've never really been able to replace Vince Wilfork and what he used to do. He used to just stop the run. Sure. Right, exactly. So they haven't been able to replace him since. So I think that's one thing they'll have to address as well. But I like that good young core that they have on the defense, and hopefully next year they'll boost themselves up. They've had flashes of greatness, and like you said, they've just been way too inconsistent.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be very, very important to see how Bill utilizes his draft picks this year. I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of positions I think that need to be filled, and people underperforming like N'Keal Harry. I think they could consider,
Right.
as sad as that is, maybe dropping him because he's not
Right.
living up to the expectation that he was supposed to live up to after his college career, and them drafting him and him supposed to be panning out to be more than he's been.
Yeah.
So I think that there's an issue with the receiving core. And granted, I mean, there's injuries with Edelman being out, and that's been, I think, hurting them too. But
For sure.
I think that overall there needs to be some sort of change offensively, and I think their draft picks are going to be really important. And when it comes to a quarterback, if it comes down to nobody being a fit, some people are joking that the Eagles should trade Carson Wentz to the Patriots.
I've seen that. I don't know if that'll happen. Bill doesn't like to spend that type of money.
I don't think I'd want that to happen either, just seeing how unreliable that he's been. And I wouldn't want to spend that kind of money on somebody like that and have him not be reliable either. So
exactly.
I think if it comes down to free agency not working out at the quarterback spot, I mean, it seems to me like Stidham isn't the answer either. So
no, a lot of people want him to start playing now because they think that the season's basically over. But we've seen Jarrett Stidham come in once last year and I think 3 or 4 times this year, and he hasn't shown much. I guess he hasn't had a full week to come in and be the starter, but every chance that they've given him, he just hasn't looked very good, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that Chiefs game was kind of just, they were destined already to lose that game as soon as didn't play. But I mean, so they kept it surprisingly close considering that Cam wasn't playing. But I mean, neither of those two quarterbacks that they had, with Hoyer starting and then with bringing Stidham in, it was like Stidham looked slightly better than Hoyer in that game, I thought.
Right.
But still, he comes into games and he's not even, he doesn't do much of anything, and he's not even at Cam's level, and Cam hasn't even overall been doing that great either. So I think that drafting a young quarterback that they can kind of teach into the system, if they can't get a solid free agent in Jimmy Garoppolo or somebody else, then I think that they need to consider that, because it seems like that might be the best option at this point. And if they really insist that Cam is long-term, because Bill hasn't said anything really about the quarterback situation other than just saying Cam's our quarterback.
Right.
Hasn't really said much else of anything, and that, which is also kind of how he is. He's never really been, an open guy, but it seems like for right now, he's pretty set on Cam, but obviously things could change in the offseason. But if he really feels like Cam is his quarterback, then he's going to have to consider building his team around Cam and playing style. But I really could see him not going with Cam in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens this offseason, because I really don't have much of a prediction, because you never know what Bill Belichick is thinking. I don't know if he's planning on using Cam Newton, if he's completely planning on going to the draft, if he has a whole nother plan altogether where he's going to finagle some sort of trade. And you can never know what Bill's going to do. The only thing to expect with Bill Belichick is to expect the unexpected. So who knows what he's going to do? I also saw a thing today that people are saying Cam Newton's considering retirement. Who knows how true that is, but it's just another thing being thrown into the mix to make 2021 a crazy offseason.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like Bill a lot of times will make these moves just randomly and nobody's expecting it at all. And that's just all. So you can never really predict or know what he's thinking about anything, because he never lets anybody know that, which is also a good thing about him and his strategy, because he never really leans people in one direction or the other.
Right. And even that was with the Cam Newton signing. I had no idea that was coming. I mean, it came out in like the end of June, early July, whenever it was, and it came out of thin air. I don't remember anyone reporting that might be coming or anything. No. It just came out of thin air.
No, yeah, it was completely out of the blue. And as soon as that happened, everybody was like, well, that's a Belichick thing to do. And obviously there's something that he sees in Cam Newton that he thinks he could work with. So he's just going to go with it.
Yep. Whatever Belichick thinks, though, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. 6 Super Bowls, he's gone to 9. So whoever he decides should be the quarterback, I'll support him.
Exactly. Yeah, he hasn't given me a reason to not really trust him as a coach. So I think that whatever he ends up deciding to do in the offseason, we have to hope that that's something that's beneficial, and hopefully, obviously, with 2020 being the abnormal year that it was, that 2021 isn't like that, and that
Right.
there's more, it's more back to normal in 2021. And also not having fans there, I feel like makes a difference for a lot of teams too, because it's weird kind of playing a football game without fans there. So
yeah, especially in some of these stadiums where you're used to the crowd being so loud, like when they go to Seattle, the crowd usually goes ballistic. They have the 12th man. Even in Buffalo, those crowds are extremely rowdy. Yeah. So it's just such a different like atmosphere now when they just have the guy hitting the button to make the noise.
Yeah, it's just not the same. So a lot of the momentum isn't there. Exactly. That is there when the fans are there. So I feel like that definitely is something that should be considered too.
Yep.
Overall, when it comes to these teams that, are used to having their fans play a role in their momentum and the way that they do things on offense, and the fans are a big part of it, and that does make a difference in games. So that's definitely something else that we could consider, that we hope is going to be more regulated and back to normal next year.
Yep.
Because that's definitely a factor too. So I think there's a lot of different things that need to be taken into consideration here, but how they utilize the offseason is going to be very, very important no matter what happens this year. But honestly, if they don't make the postseason, they don't make the postseason. If they do, I think they should see that as an accomplishment this year with everything. And even the fact that Bill even had them close to being playoff contenders without having a whole lot to work with offensively, and with, having the most COVID opt-outs in the league too. Yeah. All of that being a factor, and him still keeping them like nearly in playoff contention, then that goes to show, how good of a coach he really is, and that coaching is still important.
Yeah, I agree. I attest this season just to Bill Belichick, how good he is. I know everyone's cheering throughout the rest of the country at the downfall of the Patriots and them probably not making the playoffs. But when you really step back and look at it, they had the most opt-outs, like you said. Cam Newton, a new quarterback, he didn't sign until the end of free agency. Then he got COVID. They've dealt with a lot, and they've been inches away from a bunch of games where their record would be completely different. So for them to end up like 8-8, 9-7, whatever it might be, it's kind of a moral victory overall. And I think 2021 is going to kind of be like Belichick's revenge tour. They'll be back.
I think so too. Yeah, this is definitely not the end of the Patriots for everybody. So
no, definitely not.
Other fans of teams and other teams in the division, they better get ready, because I think next year is going to be a lot different story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we close up, can you just remind everybody what the name of your show is so that people can check it out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on two. One of them's Sunday through Thursday at 9:00, and that's on a thing called Sportscaster. It's also on YouTube. That's DPN commentary. And then I have another one where I'm by myself on Wednesdays. That's at 5, and that's called Conor Commentary. And that's Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you can find podcasts. That's where we're at.
Yeah, no, I'm sure people will definitely check you out. I know that I enjoyed having you on the show. You were a great guest. Definitely.
Thank you for having me.
And I was really looking forward to the conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. You know where to find Boston Balling. It's on all social media platforms. It's on all podcast streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify, any others that you follow. So you can follow the Boston Balling podcast on those, and you can find me every Tuesday at this time at 7:30. And I appreciate everybody tuning in again. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Go Patriots.
Go Patriots. Go Red Sox. Go all Boston teams.
That's right.